Okay, ready, Kate? Let's do this thing. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the importance of routines. Let's make sure I can share my slide. Is that working? Kate has to be the one to tell me that it's working because you're the only one I can see. Okay,
Indeed. Yeah.
perfect. Great. Um, I'm Mariel Benjamin. I'm the VP of Content and Community at Cooper. Those are the humans that I am responsible for, Maddie and Lucas, and my husband, Matt, who I feel only slightly less responsible for, especially this time of year. I feel pretty responsible for him and all the things we have to do as a family. Cooper, in case you are new to us, we are an online parenting platform. We give parents support that is informed by research, use the science of early childhood development to help you make the day-to-day decisions about all things parenting, including monthly groups where parents learn together with a facilitator like me, and also events like this one. So we are super excited to be here today with ByHeart. I'm going to let Kate do her intro.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. Thank you for having us, Cooper and Marielle. It's so nice to, like, I've heard the lore about you, but now meeting you face to face is so much fun. ByHeart is an infant nutrition company. Our sort of fundamental belief is that parents should be empowered to make better feeding choices. And it's, 2024 almost. There are a zillion ways to parent and to feed your baby. And breastfeeding is wonderful. I certainly did it for a period of time. It's not something that everyone can do or wants to do. So we just believe that parents should have options that they feel really great about. So we launched our first product in infant formula this year. We're now direct to consumer only and we're in Target. But we really the only way to really innovate infant formula, it's kind of a tricky category, is to build it entirely from the ground up and start from scratch. And so that's what we did. And would love to chat with anyone about what that actually means. Because it is kind of a whole other ball of wax. But we recreated a recipe that comes closest to breast milk, so we feel really proud of that. And yeah, just want parents to feel good and, like I said, empowered in their feeding choices. So that's really our goal.
And it's such a pretty container. It's gorgeous looking,
Well,
aesthetically pleasing.
thank you. I can't take full credit, but I do agree that we were really sort of like thoughtful about all of the pieces
Yeah.
of the puzzle. It's like food for your baby. It should look
Doesn't have to look like
beautiful and pretty.
medicinal and sterile and all of those other things. And having worked in a hospital for 20 years, it's like a nice, refreshing change to that
Yeah, it's
market. So
important. If you're going to feel proud of it, like you want to feel proud of all of it.
exactly. Okay, so getting into our topic for today, and I think the Q&A feature is on. Hopefully, I'll do an okay job checking it. But if anybody has questions, please throw them in there, interrupt. I will do my best to check, or we will have time at the end. We are going to talk about why routines matter for development, where you can start with routines, then how to get flexible about the routines you just created, and of course, any of the questions. So I am assuming from the audience that we have little bitty babies of a variety of days, weeks, and months. But I think it's really helpful to start, especially in these early days of parenting, to get into your own particular mindset about routines, right? We learn and relate to others better when we can sort of understand what's going through your mind. So I want you to take your morning routine, and Kate and I were just talking about our mornings. I have very early mornings. So like my routine is so important to me, but I want you to take yours. And I want you to imagine I'm going to walk you through something that I hope is kind of close to your routine, that you have like the place that you go for coffee. And maybe you're even like getting your baby ready to leave the house so you can go to said place for coffee, right? So you've done all the things driving towards this like mountain reward at the end, which is that coffee place that you love that is worth standing in line for. And you get there and it is closed, right? And then you have the like, oh my God, I just did all of this and it's not the way. So you go to the place next door, but it's just not quite the same. It's not what you wanted it to be, right? And then you have this call that you were going to do and you were going to get home early and you were going to have a second to organize yourself before it. and then you don't get to that in time, right? You don't get your little organization. You don't get, for me, it's like my 10 minutes of silence in the bathroom, right? Like you don't get whatever it is. How dysregulated do you feel the rest of the day, right? Or how off do you feel? What is that, commonly said statement of like, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed really have to do with? Oh, look, we have a 2-year-old. Okay, exciting. Okay, great. What does that look like when you've lost that day that started the way you wanted it to, when you think that you had that control and that planning and that falls apart? Well, that is sort of what routines feel like for babies from birth, right? Which is that there's so much that is unpredictable that there have to be systems of organization in the brain. And the way we see that the brain actually develops is pathways that it creates over and over and over again, right? So we begin to learn through patterns, through organization, through sorting, and our brain actually takes new information and tries to make sense of it. And if it has the same consistent information over and over again, those pathways get solidified in a baby's brain, again, starting right at birth. And we learn that that consistency actually helps the brain to grow and develop. So famously, there's a statement, neurons that fire together, wire together, right? Which is that if we learn how to do things repeatedly, and you'll notice this at any age, if you have older children or if you're around older children and you see like repetition really not only breeds mastery, that kids get good at that, but it also really helps kids understand and sort all of the new information that's coming at them. And in this baby period, everything, understandably, is new. Right? So when we think of routines, I want you to let go of just the idea that routines are like a nice to have. And hopefully from the end of this conversation, you understand them more as a must have for babies to be able to thrive and grow the way that we want them to. So when we talk about different ways they work, one way is that they help babies feel safe, right? And children, again, of all ages. So when we know that our basic needs are going to be met, that our caregiving is consistent and responsive, then that part of our brain is satisfied and we can move on to learning everything else that we need to do. And if you've heard about a secure attachment in the early years, right, what we're talking about is that caregiver-child relationship. And it doesn't have to be a parent and it doesn't have to be only one parent, but we're talking about a dependable, reliable caregiver. So I, as a baby, know that I cry and someone generally comes to pick me up. I'm hungry and somebody generally feeds me. My diaper is wet and someone comes to change me. And the consistency of knowing that, and for the 2-year-olds, I fall and someone cares, right? Whatever that is, the consistency of knowing that someone will show up for me, that can be dependable, quiets that part of my brain. And what we see is that in babies and children who don't have reliable, consistent caregiving, there is that space of worry, right? And that can actually interfere with all of the rest of the brain's capacity to learn and grow and do other things. So in that way, routines help us to feel safe, right? And you may even notice this about yourself as an adult. For me, it's like I can be traveling and I can love every part of it and having the most wonderful time. And then I hit that point where like I just need my own shower and my own bed and the boring consistency of the house that felt suffocating a week before it, right? Because there is that grounding sort of background quality. So routines are that background safety that we know that we need babies to feel and to have. Routines also help you regulate your behavior. So at any one time, we are regulating not only our behavior, but our emotions and our attention, right? So we receive stimuli, babies receive stimuli, and they have to decide, how do I feel about it? What am I going to do about it? Which is going to be my behavior. Bless you. And how am I going to sort of hold myself together? And one of the ways that routines help us to have strong regulation skills is to know what's coming next. So I know what my day generally is going to look like when I look at my schedule, when I look at my calendar, when I can understand like, oh, I've had that meeting before. I've given this talk before. I know generally what that's going to look like. And that can quiet, again, my worry and my anxiety. When I know what to anticipate, I can psych myself up for it. I'm giving a talk today. I better drink an extra cup of coffee to wake myself up. I better make sure my lighting is good in my office. Like I know what is required of this task. When our children know what's required of a certain task, then they can predict it and they can regulate towards it. So as your babies get a little bit older, you'll start to notice something like a bedtime routine, which we're going to talk about in a second, really helps signal to them that it's time to go to sleep. It's not just like a nice to have. It signals to their brain, oh, after this happens every day, I get really calm and quiet and I fall asleep. Right? And again, we see this outcome across development. So children who don't know what's coming next, babies who don't, who are in that constant state, as I mentioned, of just like that hypervigilance of, is someone going to come? Is someone going to show up? Am I going to get my needs met? Have that constant anticipation that we see actually can pressure the immune system so that kids can thrive less and develop not as ideally in these early periods if they're spending all of that attention worrying and thinking about what might come next. And that, by the way, is true essentially in the toddler years and as children continue to develop. We all regulate better when we know what the schedule is. So if you think of like that early pre-K classroom and why they have the schedule that says exactly what they're going to do and why they look at that and sing a song about it, that's all in the service of the routine helps us regulate. The next thing about routines is that they help teach us what to expect. If I know what I do when I go to gym class, right? I sit on the mat, someone sings a song, they roll a ball towards me, I'm practicing rolling it back, and I know what that looks like. I can work to control my impulses, to inhibit, what else I might want to do, to control my attention and focus. I can practice that because I know generally what this is like. And this is what we see, especially in this early year around bedtime, mealtime, what it looks like to have a play date, and then transitions, which is really like our goodbyes and our separations. We need strong routines in those areas to help us know how to behave, right? I don't know what I'm supposed to do when my mom leaves until I've practiced it enough that I now begin to understand what to do every single time that she leaves. And then really importantly, because the research would not be complete if we didn't talk about how routines help parents. So if you're a person who already knows you have strong routines, then getting your baby to have strong routines is not only essential for your baby, but it's for you. And if you're a person who says, this is my first kid, I've lived by the seat of my pants, I didn't have any routines, I love being flexible, I just see which way the wind blows, that might be great. But we have a lot of research that once you have a child and once your demands are not your own, that routines can help your regulation and your mood. So if you're waking up every day saying, gosh, I hope this is going to be an okay day. I hope I get to shower today. I hope I might be able to take a walk. I really wonder if I'll be able to get to anything on my to-do list. And that feels dysregulating to you. That feels like it provokes anxiety, or it makes you feel like you are more depressed or stuck in a rut. Then having a strong routine could ensure that you get to do those things. If you schedule that walk, you know you're going to get to it. If you know about what time your baby needs to eat again, you can plan for it, right? So the strong routines help you to find your own regulation across mood and behavior. And sometimes if we don't schedule things, they never get done and they become those unproductive worries that just cycle for us, right? We'll never have time to do it. It'll never be possible. I'll never shower again, right? And all the things start to pile up. So we want to make sure that even if we're not convinced that our children need the routines, we know what we need and we prioritize that just as much. I say all the time, and I will say till the end of time, it benefits your child for you to feel well much more than it does for you to solely prioritize their needs at your expense. Right? So a baby needs a mother and a primary caregiver who feels well and regulated more than they need, you to completely self-sacrifice and do whatever it is that they're following all day long, right? Your baby won't be able to create all of these routines on their own. So part of this is also about you figuring out what's good for both of you as a dyad, not just what's good for your baby or just what you want to do, right? It's what's that balance and what's that combination. And routines can be one great way to find that. I'm going to take a breath. If there's any questions, I'm reminding you, throw them in chat or in the Q&A. So one thing I hear all the time is that having really strong routines is going to make my baby rigid. And maybe you've just had this experience. I have this experience every year. My children are older and I still have this experience, which is like Thanksgiving with family. And all of a sudden, some family member is like, gosh, you're really intense about bedtime, right? And you get those routines challenged. Or someone suggests that because you have a way of doing things, you're inflexible. Well, actually, the research is quite the opposite. Having a strong routine means that you can have more variation. You can go on a vacation and stay up late. You can travel at a family member and have your child sleep in something different than they would normally sleep in. And then you can return to your routines to find that regulation. So just like that example I used for myself on vacation, when I crave what feels safe and familiar, our babies can learn to do the same thing. And having strong routines mean that those variations have less sort of dysregulation for kids overall, right? So they can learn like, hey, I'm in this weird, strange new place and the rules seem really different here. And then I can return to that routine when I need to and draw strength and recovery from that. So I don't want you to be under the misconception that making a routine means it will be your routine forever. It's more that consistency is what you're going for. So as much of that consistency as you can bring to another place, you can bring. As much as you can't, and you work back and forth. But there will be lots of reasons that your routine is disrupted. These are just a few: vacations, sickness, family coming to stay. You know, I'm from New York City, where family coming to stay uproots the entire apartment because we have no physical space to be away from each other. So everybody does a different schedule. And then we return, right? So our routines are our safe haven to return to. They don't make us rigid. And as you get older children and you start worrying about a dependence on some aspect of the routine, we can definitely talk about what you can do, because you do want them to be adaptable when that routine isn't possible anymore. But that's something we're going to also think about as we make routines. So what are the routines you could be looking for in this first year of life? Again, these are consistent for all ages, but just thinking about babies, where do you start? Bedtime is a great place to start. So as early as day 2, when you came home from the hospital, you could start a bedtime routine. It seems ridiculous because your baby might be waking up many, many times during the night, but you can still have what you call the bedtime. And I generally would recommend between 6 and 8 p.m. is everything after that is considered middle of the night, right? And then you have that bedtime somewhere in that 2-hour range to sort of signal like, this is when actual sleep begins, right? And you can choose whatever you want. There's not a lot of rules about this. I know people are always like, does it have to be a book? And then does it have to be a bath? And when do you start a book if your baby's so little? And should I sing a song? What I would say is that you have to love the routine. Your baby's going to love something that you love, that feels like it brings connection, that has that sort of satisfying moment between the two of you. It does not matter what it is. When we look at data about why reading is so popular at bedtime, it's really because we can schedule it. We can reserve it the way I was just talking about. We budget our time. It's not because there's something more magical about whether you do it with a book or whether you tell a story or whether you sing, right? In the early years, we know that the power of your voice and the power of your touch are great soothers for your baby. So I would encourage you to think of something in the routine that leverages that, right? So if you're reading, you're singing, you're telling a story, you're using your voice. If you're doing an infant massage, if you're doing a bath, if you're doing a cuddle, you're using your touch, right? So think about at least incorporating voice and touch into something. And remember to keep it not too long. So Kate, you can tell me how long your bedtime routine is with a 2-year-old, but sometimes I get into these like, it's an hour and a half. I do a medley. My husband does a medley. Then there's like, giraffes that appear. We want to kind of keep it reasonable. What are you at this moment in time?
We're at the moment of like, oh, one more book. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like 5 or 6 books. So
Yeah.
leaving 30 minutes for
30
bed,
minutes.
not because he's being wild. He's just enjoying more books. So
Absolutely.
like, I don't want to rush that.
Yeah. 30 minutes, I think, is a great balance. And especially if you are a working parent and you're away from your child most of the day, you want to give yourself enough time to feel like it was a quality interaction, right? I'm at, with my 12-year-old, 5 minutes for a bedtime routine because I'm like, you need to go to sleep. It's getting later. We need to do this as tight as possible. My 9-year-old is still a kid who needs 30 minutes. He needs a longer wind down. He needs more connection. We have to talk about all the big questions. My warning to all of you is like, what seems like one more book now becomes like, why is there war? And you're like, oh my gosh, you can't ask this at bedtime. I'll never get out of here, right? So our bedtime routines are always moving and changing, but having a strong one is a great place to start, even with the littles.
Mhm.
The next one would be mornings. So getting out of the house in the morning, again, even getting dressed if you're not leaving anywhere, even transitioning your baby from the night sleep into like, this is daytime, the lights are on, we're singing, we're talking, we're doing more. That transition can benefit from a routine. So if you are using daycare or you are working and leaving the house, think about planning as much of that routine down to the minute. I used to pick out all of my clothes to wear to work on Sundays, because if I knew what I was wearing, I would not have to be balancing my baby, trying to do a feed and figure out which pants fit me postpartum at the same time, right? So a strong routine can be something like the diaper bag is already packed if you're going somewhere in the morning and everything's sitting by the door for you to just be able to get out in that stroller, in that car, right? Or if you're the one leaving, it could be your empty coffee cup is sitting by the coffee machine so you know exactly how to fill it. I have a real coffee theme today. I must need more caffeine. By the door, and your shoes are picked out and everything else is lined up for you. But thinking about a strong morning routine is a really important transition. So again, whether it's your baby leaving the house with you or you leaving the house, having that moment of transition down can quiet all of the rest of the chaos, the screaming at your partner, the feeling berated by yourself, the leaving with realizing you never brushed your teeth, the baby not having a change of clothes in the diaper bag. All of that can be quieted by a really tight routine, right? And a lot of parents will prep the night before when you feel like you're a little bit more sane, right? To know what all of that stuff is around that routine, but whatever way works for you. And as your children become older in the 2-year-old set, the routine involves them. So it's like, what do we do every morning when we wake up? We take off our diaper. We put on our clothes. We brush our teeth. We eat our breakfast. We pack our backpack, right? That's what you're going to be modeling as your child develops and grows, is what does that look like? And when I meet with clients with older kids who are having such struggles in the morning, it's almost always the routine that's fallen apart on either the parent or the child side. They get harder to wake up too, which is a whole another thing they don't look forward to. So then there's meal times. So of course it feels like if you haven't started solids yet and you are doing feeds almost constantly, that it's your full-time job. But you want to start helping to prepare your child for what meal times are going to look like as they grow, right? And so talking, even doing a bottle or breastfeeding in the beginning is a great place to start. Not the night feeds, right? So during the day with feeds, you're starting to practice conversation and giving back and forth. If your baby can stay awake during a feed, you're trying to have that interaction, right? And as you begin to introduce solids, you're having strong conversations at the dinner table, I was going to say, but I don't know, kitchen table, about everything that's going on. So you're pulling that high chair. As soon as you can use a high chair, you're pulling it up to the table, right? It's not a kid on an island in the corner of their own high chair while everybody else sits over here or walks around. It's up to the table. You also sitting, you also eating if you can. You're having crackers while they're trying peas, and you are modeling what meals look like. And our expectation of meals, that we sit for them, that we talk through them, that we have utensils that are around even if we're not using them, and really establishing that early. When we look at what matters about family meals in development, what the research suggests to us is it's much more about the communal moment, the conversation and the connection, than what we're actually eating. Although it does show reduced rates of obesity and overall healthier mealtime choices if families eat together. So again, I'm not suggesting that at 7 months you eat pureed carrots. You don't have to go quite so that far, but you might be talking about your carrots and my carrots on the plate, right? Or you're eating your lunch and I'm eating my lunch, and helping to create that sort of connection around the community of meals, rather than here's one avocado slice at a time, while I'm standing over here, right? So we get that really established early. And then the last one that we're just focusing on today, there are so many routines, is around goodbyes. So separation anxiety usually begins around 6 to 8 months. There's no magic there. It's developing all along the way. But as we get that sense of object permanence, as babies realize that things exist when they can't see them, we start to see separation anxiety. And one of the ways to really focus on separation anxiety is to have a strong goodbye routine. So I almost always have to remind parents that the routine needs to be clean and short, because your lingering does no favors to your child, right? So at all ages, you want to come up with a little phrase you say goodbye to, a little happy wave. If you need to cry when you've gotten to the other side of the front door, I totally understand that. I always describe with my New York City elevator sort of analogy that by the time you get to the lobby, your child upstairs in the apartment has stopped crying and you've started crying, right? That should be the visual that you're kind of going for. So it's fine to be upset, but not in front of your baby. In front of your baby, you're going to model, I love you so much. I can't wait to hear about your day later. Mommy always comes back, if you like using that kind of language, and then you're out. And that short, clean goodbye, while it might feel like it's not enough and it'll never be enough, helps to signal to your baby's brain, again, with consistency and routine, mommy does go away and then she always comes back. And I can survive this. I did it yesterday. I'll do it tomorrow. It looks the same every time. And you want to practice even within your own house if you're in a separation anxiety phase, if there's any of you out there in that like 8-9 month thing where you can't take a shower without your baby wanting to see where you are, right? In those moments of peak separation anxiety, you can say, hey, I was in the other room and I came back, right? You were calling me. I was taking a shower and now I'm here. And you're helping to normalize that over and over so that the brain can make capacity for, hey, I've done this loop before and it worked out okay. And the more we can have the routines feel comforting in that way, I've been here before, the more we can help our babies to accept that and move on. Okay. So what do we do if we're not with our babies all the time and we can't control every aspect of their routine, right? For babies and for toddlers. And childcare is one of those first places where it starts. If you have in-home childcare, then you might be trying to get someone else to do things exactly the way you do them. And if you're bringing your baby to childcare, you may have the challenge of other kids that they need to accommodate and routines they've already established. So one of the best messages, with all things parenting, control is sort of like where we really like to dig in. We can't control everything. So we have to pick and choose which aspects of the routine really matter to us. I think you're going to find it's around sleeping and eating that things matter the most to you, right? If you are on a beautiful sleep schedule where you know exactly when your baby needs to nap and it's giving you great nighttime sleep and you're just thrilled with how things are going, or if you have a toddler and you're down to one nap and you've finally done that work and you need it to be at this exact time in order to have a good bedtime, those are the things you could prioritize. And those are conversations, right? It's not being rigid. It's not being controlling. It's saying, look, sleep is really important. And this is what we've been doing at home that's working really well. Can we find a way to work together to make this work at daycare, or to make sure if you have an in-home nanny, you're not going to a music class that competes with the time we know that you need to go to sleep, right? Let's prioritize that routine above other interests that we might want to do. On the flip side, if you don't have a strong routine and you have a caregiver coming in or you're going to childcare, you might say, what do you find, with other 5-month-olds? How are you napping them at daycare? And let me get on your schedule. Because your daycare may say, look, we've noticed you're asking us for a noon nap time, but he's exhausted much earlier and we're actually finding it's better. Then this might be time for you to take in that information and say, I'm going to preserve that childcare, daycare schedule during the times when the baby's with me, right? So that might be more helpful. Now, you don't need it to be perfect, but you don't want it to be so different that you're doing something entirely opposite on the days that the baby's with you or on the weekends, and then expecting your baby to adapt back and forth, right? Remember, that type of flexibility will take some time. And whenever we make changes around something like sleep, we need to do it consistently for 5 to 7 days before we can expect to see if it's really working. Right? So we can't just start putting babies down at a different time. Usually what happens is like it works for the first 2 days, and by the third day, you're like, oh, this failed. This isn't helping. But we have to do it with enough consistency to help them to be able to adapt. Around mealtime, maybe it's the same thing. Maybe you're looking for hunger cues. Maybe you've already put your baby on a schedule, but that would be the kind of thing you want to discuss with a caregiver so that those routines feel consistent for what you can do at home. And then you want to think about flexibility about other things. Does it really matter if they play first for a little bit of time, or they sleep first, or if they get the bottle, half an hour earlier because that's when everybody's getting a bottle. You want to kind of really think big picture. Am I digging in because it makes me feel good to control it and to get a text update every 15 minutes about what they're doing? Or is this something that I could be flexible with and it probably doesn't matter? And for all of us, that's a really hard parenting moment, but we want to try to find where those moments exist and take off some of the pressure to make things exact all the time and really focus in on like, hey, I've got sleep and feedings going the same way on the schedule. Like I can let a lot of the rest of it go. And that might be what you find. And I would love to hear if you're not finding that or you're having specific challenges, put them in the Q&A and let's go through them. And then the best part about my job is that I get to tell you, like, in whatever phase you are, get really good at it so that it can change on you right after you really nail it, right? Our routines are always changing. They have to, because they have to adapt to our children growing. And as much as you're like, oh, I love this bedtime routine that we're doing, then you're like, but now we're staying up later and it's harder for me to do. Or now I have two children and it's not possible for me to do the 2-hour song and dance I was doing for one, right? Life interferes and your child's development interferes. You know, when your kids start reading for themselves, you have to figure out how to work that in. So there are always different things that are changing. So don't think about your routine needing to be the thing that's consistent. It's a routine needing to be consistent. So you might realize by toddler years, your children want the same book over and over, which is developmentally appropriate. They don't want 6 different books. They want the same book. And you say, okay, new strategy for routines. Or maybe they're taking a bath earlier in the day when they came home from daycare and they're not taking a bath at nighttime. So that comes out of the routine. Or maybe you've realized that you have multiple children or dogs or jobs or life and you can't both do bedtime together, which is something in the early months, a lot of, co-parents everybody wants to be involved in bedtime. And then we realize that's not sustainable. So it's not that it can't change. The purpose of this talk is really to convince you to get a routine and then continue to revise that to whatever it needs to be. And we want to be responsive. Above all things, we want to practice responsive parenting, which is just a fancy way of saying that we recognize the needs of our children and we meet those needs. That doesn't mean we give in to everything they want or we have no rules or we have no limits. It means that we are always moving in response to the situation in front of us. So I encourage you to continue to do assessments of like, what is working for me? What do I need in this moment? And create a routine that satisfies that instead of being like, how can I force this routine on myself and my baby? Because, that lady at that Cooper talk told me it had to be that way. So you want them to be something that can grow and move with you and allow yourself that flexibility and the permission to continue to revise that as much as you need to. So I think that is it for the formal talk. We're reminding you that both ByHeart and Cooper are here to support you in all things of this parenting journey and all the different ways that we possibly can. And it looks like there's a promotion deal for both of them. So if you have a code on each side of your screen, and we'll also send you an email and a handout to follow up with those codes. But we have some time for questions if there are any. I will stop the share so that not that I can see any of your faces, but at least it'll be easier to tell. Any questions? Anything top of mind for anyone?
That was so helpful. I love what you said. It's just a routine.
Just a routine.
Like know that in my, head, but in my heart every night I'm like, oh, it has to be the same thing. And no.
Totally.
Yeah.
I still feel that when I'm like, my life, my routines have started to look so different than in my mind what beautiful routines would look like. And I have to remind myself it's down to whatever it is. My kids and I have sayings with each other, which is something you could start with the toddler, which is like, we have a good night ritual. Like, I love you more. I love you more. It's impossible, right? Like we have a little thing we say, and that is so grounding to my kids. They will call me if I'm out of town working to have me do that routine with them. And I'm like, how did we get down to a sentence? But it still feels so centering for them. So yes, don't take the pressure for it to be a beautiful, wonderful routine that you imagine in your mind, just a routine.
Yeah, love that.
Anything else from anybody? We can give you back the gift of some time to deal with December. Middle of December is a stressful time for all of us. Okay. Well, this was fun. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you so much. That was really great, Marielle.
My
So fun.
pleasure. And
Questions.
nice to meet you. And I
You
hope we get to do
too.
it again soon.
And you send this around the recording.
Yes. We'll send the recording and the handout and all things.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.